Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. We are waking up with watches, and everything you see here today is for sale. Prices in the description below. Reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com to buy, trade, or sell any of these watches, even just to inquire about them. We also trade and we buy, so trade your old flame for a new one, or we will buy your entire collection. We pay cash, we pay fast, no upper limit on value paid. To buy, trade, or sell, reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com. Back in 2020, Rolex rebooted its Oyster Perpetual collection, richer, more technically accomplished, and also more colorful. They were a reinvention of Rolex's oldest running sports watch line. And in 2023, the Oyster Perpetual turns 90. Here we have the candy pink Oyster Perpetual 36. This is the 126000, a lovely timepiece that features a bright lacquered candy pink or cotton candy dial, chromalite blue lume, a 70-hour power reserve, 100-meter water resistance, robust anti-magnetism, and shock resistance. Suitable for him or for her in terms of fit. It wears beautifully, though I will note that 36 millimeters traditionally has been a men's watch size at Rolex. You can see on my 16-centimeter circumference wrist, it wears quite nicely. It also sits quite low, so it's a sports watch, but it's also a dress watch. Major change for the 2020 generation of the OP was that we now got Easylink, the 5mm snap-in, snap-out tool-free adjustment system that allows you to tailor the fit on the fly. So lots to love right here, but we're jumping from one full bracelet sports watch to another, and the delta is going to be fairly huge now because we're looking at the H. Moser & C Streamliner Center Seconds. We have a lovely matrix green center dial in Moser's signature Fume smoked fade. Now this watch is designed in homage to several different watches of the 1970s, and it's named after the streamlined trains of the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. It's 40 millimeters and it's only about 11.7 millimeters thick. It's an easy watch to wear. It's 120 meters water resistant. It uses a material called globalite to lume the dial. Globalite is a block of ceramic impregnated with superluminova. So 3-day power reserve, hacking seconds, manufacture automatic movement. You can see that the watch has very little dead angle in the operation of the crown. The hands jump almost immediately. You can also see the dial is of high quality with black polished applique indices, the balance that comes with no date, and you can even see that the lacquer that's used to create the gradient has a wonderful little glossy sheen at close range. Now the watch has a beautifully integrated bracelet. This is no normal Nautilus or AP Royal Oak. The integration and the tolerances of this bracelet surpass both of those industry standards. Throw it on my 16-centimeter circumference wrist, and you can see this is why my favorite Moser sports watch is the Streamliner, and probably my favorite integrated bracelet sports watch is the Streamliner Center Second right here. It's low enough to fit underneath the cuff. It's really not that large. It's thin. It's short across the wrist. It's got a reassuring solidity to it. And then on the underside, we have Moser's HMC. Let's get a little bit closer with the zoom. HMC 200 automatic movement. It's got a full balance bridge, a free sprung balance. Moser, highly sophisticated at movement manufacture, builds its own movements, yes, but also its own assortments. The lever, the escape wheel, the balance itself, as well as the hairspring, all made by Moser through its in-house precision engineering subsidiary. We have bevels on the bridges, we have black polished screws, engine turning on the base plate, satination across the bridge, 3 different finishes on the rotor, and double crested Cote de Genève across the bridges. Moser making between 2,000 and 3,000 watches a year is still quite small when you consider that RM makes between 5,000 and 6,000. This is the Streamliner Center Second that debuted back in 2020. We're going to quickly jump back to 2016 when Vacheron Constantin launched what might be the most highly developed sports watch in the integrated bracelet sports watch class. So this is the Overseas self-winding 41 millimeters in diameter in stainless steel. You can see, like the Rolex, it too has plenty of luminescence and it uses a blue colored lume. The watch is 150 meters water resistant, which is exceptional for this class. It also features a paramagnetic ring around the movement that makes the movement caliber 5100 anti-magnetic to up to 25,000 Gauss. Remember, the standard for an anti-magnetic watch, the ISO 764, is 4,800 Gauss, so this is 25,000. 4 different finishes on the engraved rotor, which is a compass rose motif. Twin barrel automatic in-house caliber 5100 with a 60-hour power reserve. Geneva hallmark finish, but not just on the movement, also on the case, as since about mid-2012, The Geneva hallmark has been a full watch standard, not just a movement standard. Now, this watch comes with a rubber strap in black and a black leather strap to match. There's a quick release system that allows you to instantly pull the bracelet or pull the strap and make sizing adjustments. Using the quick adjust system, there's a 1.5 millimeter quick adjustment built into each side of the clasp for a total of 3 millimeters of tool-free adjustment. And there's plenty of incremental adjustability in the bracelet itself, as every single link on each side is removable. And you can see we have intermediate sized links to make the fine-tuning even more precise. The movement is beautifully finished, so is the case. You can see the immaculate execution of both satination and polishing on the steel, and the fact that the watch is fairly thin, though it's got a solidity to it that's reassuring. Black lacquer dial, that appeared as an option in 2018. These are still fairly rare. The black lacquer dials are highly sought. Maltese cross on the crown as well as on the dial, and you can see the same motif was used for the bezel as well as the center junction of the bracelet itself, and you can see just how fine the polished facets within and without those bracelet links are. Really very impressive. Possibly the best overall integrated bracelet sports watch. We've got two of the real contenders here, and then we've got a bit of a dark horse from yet another independent. And of course, I'm speaking of Czapek. Czapek, for the last couple of years, has made 150 to about 300 watches a year. They're tooling up to be able to make 800 a year, still very small numbers. In 2020, they entered the integrated bracelet class with the Czapek Antarctique, which we have right here. Now, it's 11.3 millimeters thick, 40.5 millimeters in diameter in steel. It's 120 meters water resistant. It is beautifully loomed, and there's a wonderful symmetry about how everything here is designed. As you can see, the font used for the 2 on the date disc, for example, is the same as the font used for the numeral on the dial. They have what they call a stairway to heaven motif on this ink black dial. There is a dial on the bottom on each side that allows you to quickly remove the bracelet. It, like the Vacheron, has a quick release system. The bracelet isn't quite as sophisticated in its finish or assembly as the Vacheron, but what it lacks perhaps in assembly complexity, it makes up for in beauty, as it is quite nicely designed and integrates perfectly with the angular lug profile. You can see that the crown itself features both polish and media blasting. We have a twin trigger release system for the clasp, and then internally we have an exclusive caliber for Czapek. This is the caliber SXH5. It's the fifth caliber that's been designed by or for the brand. We have a platinum micro rotor, a 60-hour power reserve. It's built for sporting purposes because you can see a full dual anchored balance bridge with a free sprung balance for toughness. It's adjusted in 5 positions like a chronometer, and it does feature both quick set and a stop seconds function, but the highlight has to be the steel bridge over the center. As you can see, it's been black polished across its top, externally beveled with beautiful attention to the quality of the interior bevels, and you can see 1, 2, 3, 4 sharp interior angles with 2 more outside, so 6 interior angles on that structure alone. And of course, cutting no costs, you can see platinum is used for the micro rotor because it's a more efficient winder than gold or tungsten would be. There are individual finger style bridges for the drivetrain down to the balance, much like you'd find in an old pocket watch, and then those bridges are skeletonized. Like the Grunefeld's watches, you can see that the Czapek bridges here are finished by recessing and then satinating the center of the bridges, creating a satinated channel. So we have media blasting in the recess, we have brushed satin along the edges, and then if you look, you can see that there's actually black polished beveling on the edge of the bridges. So 3 different finishes for each one of the bridges here. We have black polished screws with chamfered slots in circumference, and even some of the jewel and screw sinks have been beveled internally. So all of this is quite attractive, and it wears more compact, whereas something like an Overseas or a Royal Oak wears a little bit larger than its rated size. This wears exactly its rated 40.5 millimeter size, and on the factory strap it wears even smaller. Wears easily on my wrist, it slides under a cuff, very compact. I would say that a lady with a smallish wrist, as long as it's oval, would be able to give this one a shot and probably find something she likes, as it is an extremely agreeable fit. One of the rare integrated bracelet sports watches that wears it true to its size and not far larger. Okay, we're going haute horlogerie. We're staying with our independents, and we have a watch that was a bit of a blockbuster for De Bethune back in 2018. This is the DB25 Stradivarius. The name a play on the famous Stradivarius stringed instruments, the idea being both are precision instruments and works of art. Now here you get a 42mm case that's 10mm thick, so it's quite slender, and it's all grade 5 titanium, so it's a lot lighter than steel. It's hypoallergenic, and it's also more scratch resistant. The dial is a black polished and fire blued disc of titanium. We have gold leaf for the distant celestial bodies of the Milky Way. And then you can see as we get closer, the large near stars and planets are all little cabochons of gold that have been inserted into the dial. De Bethune makes its own dials, cases, and movements, so it really is a true manufacturer. I wanted the movement stationary on the reverse side so you could see one of their 10 patented balance designs. Every couple of years, Denis Flageolet, the watchmaker and co-founder of the company, comes up with a new balance design that keeps better time, reduces the impact of aerodynamic drag, has less susceptibility to fluctuations in temperature. This is the 2016 model balance. It is blued titanium, fire blued titanium, a process for which De Bethune has an exclusive method. And then there are white gold masses outboard. The hairspring is 2 pieces shaped by hand and clamped together, so it's flat and shock resistant like a flat hairspring, but it's also able to breathe concentrically and keep consistent time in a position like an overcoil. We have 1, 2, 3 shock protection springs on the balance. They call this triple parachute. It is a triple shock protection system for both durability and chronometry. There's a solid gold nameplate just below. You can see we have both blued and polished steel for the mechanism that mounts the triple parachute, and the bridge for the balance has been fully rounded and specular or mirror finished, very difficult to do on a rounded surface. You can see we have double layered barrel bridges with mirrored anglage of the finest standard on the size. The same treatment has been lavished on the jewel and the screw sinks. We have solarization on the twin self-adjusting barrels. They're patented. 6 days of manual wind power reserve, and you cannot accidentally overwind this watch because it will simply release any excess spring tension. Taking a look on the wrist, you can see it fits under a cuff. It's a very sporty take on a I would say a traditional two-hand format, but I'm not going to call it a dress watch. This is a men's all-arounder. Really, the only aspects of a sports watch it lacks are lume and high water resistance, but in terms of its durability, both in terms of scratches and in terms of shock resistance, this is as good as the best all-arounders you'll find from the likes of Rolex or Omega, and from a company that only makes 200 to 220 pieces a year. From one blue dial to another, here we have a very different kind of watch. Now, this also is not an aquatic sports watch. This is actually Blancpain, getting back in touch with its 1950s roots. The Air Command flyback chronograph from that period is one of the rarest and most collectible Blancpain watches of all time. The first reissue of the Air Command was actually 50 fathoms themed. This watch is more true to the original. It's large, but it's not a converted dive watch. In 2019, we saw the first version of this Air Command flyback chronograph, and the watch we have right here is the 2021 model year in high-grade titanium. It's 42.5 millimeters in diameter. You can see it as a flyback. It's not highly water-resistant, and pilots' watches in general are not highly water-resistant, but it is very luminescent, and you can see not only is the dial well-lumed, but the entirety of the bidirectional aviator's timing bezel has been lumed, so you can easily time concurrent events using both the chronograph and the timing bezel. The bezel insert is made of ceramic, and you can see the watch features vintage-inspired elements. There's a tachmeter on the dial. That's a very vintage element. On newer watches, tachs generally migrate to bezels. We have little 3-minute marks on the instantaneous jumping minute display because back in the middle of the 20th century when the first Air Command came out, long-distance phone bills typically were billed in 3-minute increments, and they were very expensive. Well, Blancpain calls this 2-3 titanium. Truth is, it's some variety of grade 5 because it's very hard and it's polishable, and the grade 2 stuff is not polishable. Now, jumping over to the reverse side, we have caliber 388B, which is one of the finest chronograph movements no one knows about. Automatic winding with a 50-hour power reserve. It has a 5 hertz or 10 beat per second rate like a Zenith El Primero. It's adjusted in 6 positions, not the 5 you'll find on a chronometer. It does have the hacking seconds function, allows you to see a free-sprung balance with a full dual-anchored balance bridge for shock tolerance. There's an anti-magnetic silicone hairspring. These are well known to run within a second per day. You can see that it's properly sized for this large watch, so this is not yet another Frédéric Piguet 1185 derivative. This is an entirely clean cloth cut by Frédéric Piguet and Blancpain. You can see that there is a column wheel, and the watch includes both column wheel and vertical clutch, so it has crisp actuation feel, but also has smooth, seamless engagement. You can see just how broad the bevels are. Hugely impressive. And also on the rotor, as well as the rotor interior, there's engine turning on the plates below. You can see that we have black polished screw heads. We have a lovely deep grooved spiral satination across the surfaces that looks more appropriate on a watch like this than, say, a Côte de Genève, which are far more classical. There's a full deployant clasp here. We throw the watch on my wrist. I would say you need a wrist of my size or larger to wear this. This is fine. I could wear this watch, but if your wrist is any smaller, you're going to get lug overlap because the lugs are a little bit broader than 52 millimeters from lug to lug. That said, the watch is not terribly thick. A great choice for sports watch enthusiasts. Okay. I love these, and I realize it's a love or hate product, but this is the Devon Tread 1F. The first Tread 1 came out in 2010, a product of California's Devon Works. It received a nomination for a GPHG award in the concept category, the first American watch ever nominated for any GPHG. Now, this is the 1F, which is a blackened steel case with a polycarbonate crystal, and that's down to the size of the crystal. We have 4 motors and 4 belts. The motors come from medical pumps, and the belts come from technology used on 20th century aircraft flight decks. There's an optical scanner that basically makes sure the belt always lines up perfectly. That's how, for example, the belt always centers itself perfectly on the index. It is a wonderfully animated thing. If you turn it off, it reverts to a power reserve mode that will show you between 10 and 0 what percentage. Right here you can see we are at 80% of the battery is intact. In constant seconds mode, like you just saw, it will run for 3 to 5 days. With the constant seconds deactivated, it'll run for about 7 to 10. It charges in about 8 hours, so you can get roughly an 80% charge in 4, and it is thermocompensated, accurate to 10 to 15 seconds a year, and built entirely inside the United States. Now, this version is the one that Robert Downey Jr. wore in an unsponsored capacity in Avengers Infinity War and Endgame, which is an extraordinary thing because unsponsored endorsements are the rarest and the most valuable commodity in the watch industry. Omega can pay studios a mint to have James Bond wear an Omega Seamaster Planet Ocean. And of course, there are ill-fated endeavors, like I believe it was Tissot in Independence Day 2. I think it was Tissot. But the bottom line here is that, like the Panerai Luminors bought by Sylvester Stallone in the 90s, Downey actually wore this thing completely unprompted by financial motive, and I really dig that. You can see that each one is individually numbered. When these things need service, they go back for like 2 weeks, not 3, 4, 5 months the way it is with Swiss products. And the customer service includes a dude who answers the phone and will walk you through using the watch. So again, very different from the Swiss experience, a watch that's built to American aerospace standards, but also built and served with American customer service standards along the way. Now, you can deactivate the constant seconds mode. Very easy to do. You can also reactivate constant seconds. Just take note, it is very, 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 very vocal. Now, I've put it in the setting mode so I can demonstrate to you how that works. It allows you to make changes to the hours as well as the minutes. And then, of course, when you turn it off, it will do a wonderful little stall out and go into power saving mode. It's very, very cool to see the little power reserve engage. It uses a lithium-ion battery. It is very precise, beautifully made. It really doesn't feel like a watch so much as a gadget, and I totally dig these things. I will say this, though. It will wake you up in a quiet room. Also, by the way, technically, because there are separate displays for hours, minutes, and seconds, it is also a regulator. The theater is strong with this one. All right, the theater is strong with this one too. Some Ulysse Nardin minute repeaters are just that. They chime the time. But the company also has a modern tradition of creating Jacquemart or automaton minute repeaters, and that's exactly what we have right here. This is the triple jack. You can see we have 3-hour strikers, and I'm going to set the watch so that you can see them at their best. But take note, one of the strikers is buried under the minute hand here. Black lacquered dial, white gold miniature sculptures featuring the strikers and the bells. The watch is 42 millimeters in diameter in platinum, though it's only 13.1 millimeters thick. It's a 50-piece limited edition powered by UN caliber 73, which was developed for Ulysse Nardin by its neighbor Christophe Claret, and the finishing is surpassing. It's what you would expect on the likes of a Lange or a Vacheron. Truly exquisite. You can see it uses a very traditional layout with a center wheel architecture and then like a grand old pocket watch minute repeater. It has finger trains leading down to the escapement. You can see that the bevels here are an absolute mile wide, and we do get interior angles too on the center bridge. All screw heads black polished chamfered interior and exterior. The strikers are black polished across their top, then beveled on their edges. And you can see where those bevels converge. There are beautiful angular points at the end of those steel strikers. We have circumferential gongs. It beats away at 18,000 vibrations per hour, and this is the kind of finish you imagine from the finest haute horlogerie timepieces. As good as it gets, equipped with a clasp to match and protect you. This is a watch that is a source of endless amusement among folks who are not already watch fans. You will make believers of them with the triple jack. Now, let's say you want high horology, but you don't want to pay $100,000 for a perpetual calendar from Patek Philippe, and you don't want to sit on some sort of a wait list or pay an aftermarket markup. Fortunately, Breguet has you covered, as there are fantastic complicated dress watch options selling for a fraction of their original retail. This is the Classique Perpetual Calendar Retrograde 3787 reference, 36 millimeters in diameter in white gold. It's only 8.8 millimeters thick. It has a real rose lathe and straight line machine reductive guilloche dial crafted artisanally. There's a serpentine-style retrograding date, perpetual calendar, fired steel hands, Breguet's secret signature. On the reverse side, it is a Breguet 8815, which is Breguet's high-end modification of the great Longines L990, automatic winding with a twin-barrel architecture and a 44-hour power reserve. This one's been upgraded with a few features that are not germane to the L990, including a hacking seconds function, an anti-magnetic silicone hairspring, and a durable and precise free-sprung balance. We have gorgeous danglage on the edge of the bridges, as this is finished to a Breguet standard, not a Longines standard. We have a black polished stud holder and regulator cap, screws, bridges. You can see even the barrels and the ratchet wheels finished to the highest standard. And then we have a Grand Orge or barleycorn pattern, guilloche cut on the rotor. If you don't want to pay through the nose for something like a Patek Philippe 5159, this is the way to go. They even weld the lugs to the case, so this is a highly hand-finished and handmade case. As good as it gets, a perpetual calendar from a brand that will be around forever to provide parts and service. You can see it wears really nicely on my wrist to the point that even a lady could wear it well. But if you're a man who has a taste for traditional sizes and discretion, you can't do any better. I feel a dress watch should always duck underneath the cuff, and this one can do that easily. And again, well under $30,000 for this Breguet with a full clasp to match. It's hard not to love Lange, but for some folks, higher tech and a little bit more size are worth the wait. And in 2012, Lange updated its historic Datograph model with what you see here. This is the Dato Up-Down. The watch is a little bit larger. It's now 41 millimeters compared to the original 39, but you do get something for the extra size. You get a lot more power reserve. This is now 60 hours compared to 36 on the original watch. Plus, you get a power reserve indicator on the dial, where the previous model did not have that. You still have the wonderfully crisp actuator for the panorama datum or the outsized date. Now you can see this watch right here is made of platinum, but what's exceptional is that the dial is also precious metal. It's made of sterling silver and then black galvanized. The watch is a flyback chronograph, which means you can reset and restart without first stopping it. A rare feature, a significant upcharge option on this model, is a deployant clasp. These normally come with pin buckles. On the reverse, you can see the latest version of caliber L951, which caused quite a stir when it bowed in the original model at Basel in 1999. Finished to a standard that you don't typically see on Patek watches of the 90s or the 2000s. This was a watch that really forced some soul searching at brands like Vacheron, Patek, AP, and a bunch of independents in Switzerland. As a startup, essentially a brand only created in 1990 out of Germany, was taking them all to task and setting the pace. And the modern Lange is a revived brand, revived by great men with incredible experience, but nonetheless, it is basically a modern upstart, almost like an independent. And though it has been owned since 2000 by Richemont, it still functions as an independent out of Glashütte. It is Lange's German watch brand, and it does things very differently from the Panerais, IWCs, JLCs, and even Vacherons of the world. You can see the array of color absolutely blinding. Silver, gold, violet, blue, and then there's that German silver material, a nickel copper zinc alloy used for the bridges and plates. We have one of the most poetically gorgeous column wheel lateral clutch movements ever crafted, with pivot jewels set in chaton. And you can see we have both sharp exterior points as well as sharp inward angles on the clutch by itself. All of this done by hand, and that's really impressive because the clutch is made of steel. It's harder to finish. We have a big slow beating 2.5 hertz balance, now free sprung compared to the earlier models, and it has an overcoil hairspring for concentric breathing and excellent timekeeping in any position. Well, this is a bigger dotograph. It's not a huge dotograph. It still works just fine on my wrist, which is 16 centimeters, and with the domed profile, it does slide quite easily underneath a dress cuff. I can never get enough of this watch. It came out last year. It's a 100-piece limited edition, and frankly, it's what the Moser Pioneer should have been from the beginning. It's the Pioneer rotating bezel, U.S. limited edition of 100 pieces, not only smaller at 40 millimeters, but now in titanium with a full bracelet to match. It's only 11.7 millimeters thick. It is 120 meters water resistant. It's got Moser's signature Fumé Fade smoked dial in their signature color of funky blue. It has plenty of luminescence. And what I love here is that the entire bezel is loomed. It is one of the chunkiest and most tactily impressive bezels you will encounter. A wonderful timing instrument, day or night, light or dark, and it features a titanium insert with inset luminova. You can see on the reverse side, it's the same HMC 200 we saw on the Streamliner center second, so 3-day power reserve, shock resistant, nicely finished. It also has the Brogioli quick adjust system that you'll see on brands as disparate as Lange and IWC. You push down the Moser logo and you get this roughly 1 centimeter of incremental adjustment. There's a little rack internally that allows you to parcel out the increments. We have a recess in the profile with the coining. We also have that on the case. All Moser cases feature some sort of case flank sculpting, and it's a really easy watch to wear. Every single link in the bracelet is removable, so you're going to get a great fit. They made 100 of these. They sold out almost instantly, and on the rare occasion we have a used example, it generally goes fast. So if you're watching this early on Saturday morning and you're interested in this watch, please give me a call or shoot me an email, because this thing tends to fly. A wonderful piece. It's the first Moser Pioneer that could truthfully be called a Submariner rival, because the Sub's now a 41 and the Pioneer rotating bezel is now a 40. They make for a great pair in a collection, or dueling banjos between you and your Rolex Orthodox buddy. A really, really cool watch, and you can see the dial is even better than I first described, as it features solid blocks of that ceramic-based Globalite lume serving as the hour indices. All right. Does this watch look a little bit like the Terminator when part of his flesh has been blown off? I always thought this watch had sort of like a battle-damaged Terminator look to it, and I've thought that since it first came out in 2017. This is the rarely seen and hugely collectible 5650G, the 500-piece white gold Aquanaut Travel Time Advanced Research, and this is the first example of the watch I have seen pre-owned since 2017. Well, they made 500, they disappeared, and they tend to disappear into collections that only sell to other collectors. Now, the real highlight here was the presence of a compliant mechanism, CNC'd from a single monoblock of steel and then finished by hand. It proved that steel can still serve purposes often delegated to constructions of nickel phosphorus or silicon. The compliant mechanism eliminates 2/3 of the parts in the travel time adjustment system on a standard Aquanaut. You see, you can cover up that travel time hand if you don't want it, but By reducing the number of parts from 37 to 12, Patek also removed all of the jeweled lubricated pivots, reducing maintenance requirements and necking down from 10 screws to only 4, which you can see here. As a compliant mechanism, it's the result of decades of trial, error, and raw science, as the spring steel used is largely immune to fatigue cycles and immensely simplifies the watch. It uses 20% less space than the original system, and it's also 15% thinner. Now, the watch, of course, is a travel time. It has plenty of luminescence. It is still 120 meters water resistant, and you can see how Patek cloaks the travel time adjusters as a counterbalance to the winglet that forms the crown guard structure. Now, on the reverse side, we have Patek caliber 324 SCFUS. It's exactly what you would find in a Nautilus, or at least a Nautilus up to 2019. Automatic winding, dual time with twin AM/PM indicators, anti-magnetic, and accurate to -3 + 2 seconds per day with a 45-hour power reserve. The finish does not disappoint, nor does the precision. Also worth mentioning, one of the reasons Patek forged ahead using spring steel was because it could be manually finished, whereas silicon, to which Patek has rights and licensing access, silicon cannot be hand finished. You can see that we have an AM/PM aperture for both home and local times. That's very unusual, since most dual time watches will only give you an AM/PM indicator for the location where you are currently not, whereas here you know whether it's day or night both at home and wherever you happen to be. There's also a radial pointer date down at 6 o'clock. So this watch has it all. Full matching white gold deployant clasp and lots of intricate hand finishing nuances to this case, its lugs, and the bezel. This is also the first example I've seen of the Patek Philippe 5711 1P since it came out as the 40th anniversary Nautilus back in 2016. Now, this is platinum, 40 millimeters, only 8.6 millimeters thick. The 40th anniversary Nautilus, a 700-piece limited edition. You've got a 0.02 carat top Vesselton diamond down at the base of the bezel, and then you have baguette diamonds, 0.34 carats of them, top grade, used on the dial. The dial doesn't have a gradient to its blue color the way you do on, for example, standard 5711. This is a more intense blue, almost like a cesium blue or a cobalt blue. The watch is loomed, but only the hands, though it retains the standard 5711's 120 meter water resistance. It's the most massive Nautilus I've ever felt. Now, it does appear at first glance like that dial signature might be obtrusive, but if you move away, as soon as it's arm's length, it disappears. It blends right in. It's not something that declares itself. Really, only the wearer can see it with ease. This is a brick of a watch. Unbelievable in that Patek Philippe finished platinum to the same standard as steel. Steel, comparatively speaking, is easy to finish. With platinum, you need to wear out multiple sets of tools to get 700 of these made. And while 700 might sound like a lot at face value, it's really not in the context of Patek's 50 to 60,000 watches a year, and these sell so infrequently. I always like to say that when they do, they generally trade between collections. It's rare for a dealer like Watchbox to have one of these, and yes, it is full box papers and original accessories. This is, to many, the ultimate modern Nautilus. Just to be clear, this is the 5711 1P001. There was previously a 5711 1P010. That was the first platinum 5711. This, though, is the only one with the commemorative dial and the baguette gems, so this one even a little bit more opulent than its predecessor. Okay, I had to end with this thing because it's so over the top. It's uncommon for me to end with an Omega, but when the Omega is the DeVille Central Tourbillon, how could I resist? This is a model launched back in 2015 using Maurice Grimm's original 1994 Omega Central Tourbillon architecture. Now, this one in Sedna red gold is 44 millimeters in diameter. You actually wind it by turning the crown at 3 o'clock counterclockwise, and you set it using a case back setting crown, and you can see that the hands float over the center dial because they sit on sapphire discs that are actually driven by pinions that sit under the outer dial, so they're actually radially driven. So you have your hours, your minutes, and then the flying tourbillon, which has no upper bridge to block your view. That is your seconds display. This is not just the original, by the way, platinum mass automatic winding 45-hour power reserve. The newer versions of this watch are manual wind. This is one of the original autos, but we have a titanium cage for the tourbillon. It is immaculately hand finished in the Omega Tourbillon shop, where they only do haute de gamme handcrafted watches. And you can see that it has an overcoil hairspring, a coaxial escapement, and it is a COSC certified Swiss chronometer. Now, you will never get a clearer view of what the coaxial escapement actually is and how it looks, and you can see why it's called coaxial, because you can see that there are two wheels, one small one inside the diameter of the large one and stacked on top. So we have two coaxial wheels that are being tangentially impacted and indexed and impulsed by the lever, and that tangential contact on two different levels with both direct and indirect impulse reduces friction, improves power reserve, and serves the purpose of chronometry. You can see that everything, the bridge underneath for the escapement, as well as the titanium bridge for the mechanism as a whole, really, it's not a bridge, it's a cage, because there is no upper bridge. This is a true flying tourbillon with nothing to block your view of the works. This watch originally $165,000, much less now, and from a company that will always be around to provide parts and service. You buy a watch like this from a company like Patek, and you're going to wait months and have to go through an approval process. You buy it from an independent brand, and you're going to have to deal with a high-strung watchmaker and a watch to match, and just hope he sticks around and hope he stays stable enough to provide parts and service. This watch will always be serviceable by Omega. And when it goes back for service, it goes back to the watchmakers in the tourbillon shop who originally built it. If you love any of the watches you see here, reach out to me, tmosso@thewatchbox.com, for purchase and pricing details.